Are the Illuminati working like a mirror? For example, if we choose less negativity, does this weaken the Illuminati?
Yes, dear one, this is very much how this occurs. When you do not feed them with negative energy, with shadow energy, with fear, with anger, etc., they have nothing to feed on. They have nothing to give them more power, more energy. This is why I continue to invite you to always focus on your creations of light, focus on what your heart and soul desires. Because with this focus, you do not give any energy or power to the Illuminati.
Do they know about this kind of about this technology, or about this? Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, they are very aware about how they get their energy, about how they get power or fuel for what they are doing. And this is why they desperately want humanity to remain in fear, because it is the only way that they will continue to be able to thrive, to be able to have any power. They want humanity to remain in fear, to remain in emotional reactivity, for this gives them energy.
How does the heavier programming of the Illuminati develop?
Just as light beings work with fractals of creation, it is very similar with the Illuminati. You could say they work with fractals of shadow. It began with an experiment of sorts to see how it would be to play in shadow, how it would be to create in shadow. How far could they go? How much could be created? And so the programs the programming multiplies upon itself. For once the initial programs were set forth, it was then an amplified energy that continued to recreate itself, because this is how the program was set up. And so the programming develops by continual recreation. And this is why it is so important to them for human beings to stay in fear and reactivity. For the fear and reactivity is what multiplies the programs upon itself.
Why do they have more of the programming than we do?
It is not that they have more of the programming. It is because of the way that they use light to bend and distort that much of the light programming became distorted, and many light beings became lost within this programming. So it is not that they have more, it is that they have learned how to use it against the light. They have learned how to distort the light programming. They have made it impure. And so it seems as if they have more programming. It seems as if they have the access to all of the codes of creation. But this is not so. And this is why it is important for human beings to purify themselves so that they can spark that knowing and remembering once again within them that they have access to the codes of creations, to the codes of creation, and that they have access in the purest form, for it is the purity that will restore heaven on earth. It is the purity, without the bending and distortion of the light codes, that will restore peace upon your planet. And each one can do this. Each one can do their inner work and purify themselves and purify their DNA, purify their hearts and minds, so that their remembering of who they are as creators can be restored.
Is Archangel Gabriel incarnated onto planet Earth?
It is not a full incarnation. There are aspects of this being that are incarnated into various humans. But it is not as if the soul of this being has taken a human form. This being is mostly working in the light realms.
Is the divine feminine faster in its learning and getting to source?
This is a question asked from the linear perspective. For in truth, there is no time, there is no faster and slower. In truth, the feminine and masculine are already at source, with source, embodying source.
But which would be faster in learning, a soul with the rose ray or a soul with the platinum ray?
Again, it is not quite like this, for each learns in a different way. Each connects with source in a different way. Each evolves in a different way. And so it is not that one reaches source before the other, or that one learns faster than the other. It is simply a difference in how the learning occurs, in how the connection to source occurs.
I just thought that the female learning is brighter and the male learning has more depth.
Yes, it is this way, that they are wired differently, constructed differently, carry different codes and different informations, different ways of learning and evolving. But it is not that one is better than the other or one is closer to source than the other. What you are speaking of is the male essence that is not fully developed, that is not in the sacred masculine. And so, yes, it is quite challenging for the masculine that is not within its sacred, that is not fully developed or awakened. Indeed, it is more challenging in this state. But you could also say this for the feminine. If the feminine is not in its divine state, it is much more challenging because there is an incompleteness or parts that are dormant.
Can the movement into the photon belt be delayed?
The movement itself cannot be delayed. What can occur is that those working with shadow can harness the light and continue to distort it and bend it, but only for a time, because at some point everything will be fully flooded with light, nothing will be able to be hidden, and the distortions that have been created will also be revealed. And so it would just simply be an attempt to create confusion and chaos until that time of full illumination.
Can you give us a date when there will be full illumination on planet Earth?
It is not for the highest interests of human mastery and development to give hard calendar dates, for it creates a sort of false hope. And in some, creates a type of laziness to not continue to do the work that they have come here to do. It is a bit more complex than this. While there is no delaying this process, it is also not following linear time in the way that humans understand time.
Was the photon belt created to stop the worsening of this reality and rebirth a new one?
It is one of those things that was put in place as a safeguard, if you will, for humanity, for your solar system, for your galaxy, so that no matter how challenging or dark things became, there would eventually be a time of full illumination, so that beings could awaken once again and take back their power if they chose to do so.
Is it true that the highest beings are here on planet Earth to help us evolve third density?
Dear one, at this time on planet Earth, there are unprecedented amounts of souls who have come here to restore Earth to her original condition as heaven. There are many, many souls with advanced knowledge, advanced light codes, advanced understanding, advanced DNA, who have come here bringing all of this information to infuse into the energy field of planet Earth, to the energy field of humanity, to provide codes and templates for awakening, mastery, evolution, and to dissolve the old paradigms and old matrix systems. It is quite beautiful from this perspective, dear one.
Are there souls who went through a shadow cycle and then got stuck in the darkness instead of returning to the light?
Yes, there are some souls who completed their shadow cycle and did continue to choose to work with the shadow. For some of them, it was a choice. For some of them, it was a way of getting stuck within the shadow. And so they continued to work with the shadow.
What kind of beings are forcing the cabal to play their role, and how does this work?
There are a few beings who initially stepped into shadow realms, who you could say are at the top, or the ones controlling everything. These beings work with and through those beings that incarnate into human form and those beings that work within the shadow, not in human form, but still have influence over humanity. Essentially, these few beings give instructions, but in a way that makes it seem like the beings working for the shadow have come up with these ideas themselves. For beings that work within the shadow do not like being told what to do. They like to think they have all the power. And so these beings at the top work in such a way as to influence, to implant ideas, so that the beings working for the shadow think they have come up with these ideas themselves. And so there's a lot of inception and implanting of thought forms and ideas. There is a lot of use of entities and energies being implanted. There is a vast use of artificial intelligence for programs, and machines do not have egos and therefore carry out instructions quite efficiently. Again, there is much convolution and bending of the light to manipulate. And yes, the beings working with shadow are manipulating and attempting to manipulate each other all the time. It is very common.
Before my incarnation, was there a plan for my awakening?
When a being of the light comes into human form with the sole mission of playing a role with the light and restoring heaven on earth, there is always the plan to awaken. Many come in with many codes already awake, with many aspects of themselves already awake. But because they come into human form, they must still go through the process of forgetting for most beings. And so, again, it is the confusion of how time works. There is not necessarily a set time upon which a being chooses to awaken. There is the underlying intention and energy embodied by the soul that sets forth the energy of awakening. And so when alignments can be created within the human aspect, within the environment on your planet Earth, when the soul senses that the alignments are in place, this is when an awakening can occur. And so in this way, it is not a set time in space. Rather, it is a network of alignments that is created internally and externally, in which the soul can then come into a fuller awakening within the human consciousness and awareness.